Hello, everyone. This talk will be in English, so if you have any questions, please ask me. I definitely try to answer as much as I can. Quick intro, you can call me as a Vanji, and I'm coming from Silicon Valley and working as an engineering manager and people leader who are building APIs. So as an engineering manager, I have a responsibility to deliver a high quality APIs. In previous talk, you all listened into how API first development and how the design first development can happen. So definitely this talk will be addressing some of the concerns, how we can, as engineers, can deliver a better APIs in a high quality manner in a collaborative environment. So with that context, I will move on. Quick note about the APIs. Whenever we develop an API, definitely we talk about the design first approach. At the same time, we also talk about how API can be produced in a high quality manner. But in reality, that not the real case. Sometimes in a design, we put information, but that not really converted into a API that didn't work. So this conversation, or today, the talk that I'm delivering is to make sure that how well that we can make sure that our APIs are according to the spec, at the same time how our APIs can work according to the expectation of the product owners, business stakeholders, and other people, whoever using the API. The important part here is most of the time the process is messy. Why process is messy? Because we are not really defining our roles and responsible, and who's going to define what is not clear. So in this talk, again, I will try to make it much more simpler how the BDD approach can allow all of us to produce a better API. So to do anything before we get into the API development, the most important tool that we should have is the test management tool, which contain multiple different aspects of the test management. For example, if you want to define a test, you have to have a proper ecosystem to produce the test management. And then you have to capture the test monitoring. And then you have to kick in the automation. Then you should have the executive dashboard so that you know which kind of a test being published and what is the environment it ran, etc. So to do that, I'm going to take few examples. You may all have heard about some of these tools, but in my org, we are using Jira, Zyphoscale, and Cucumber to accomplish this whole test management ecosystem. So until now, I'm trying to give a context where I'm taking towards, but next reality is the BDD. How many of you already use BDD in your organization? Would you mind to raise your hands? So I see 1, 2, 3, 4, around 3, 4 people. The most of the time, whenever I had a chance to interact with the people, so they are mentioning about how BDD is changing their way of exposing the API in much quality manner by defining the behavior of that API in much more precise manner. So is it test-driven development is differ from behavior-driven development? In my opinion, answer is no. The test-driven development is much more bigger umbrella because as an engineering manager, I really want my output to be much more better quality. So to do that, I need to drive the conversation and the execution through the test-driven development. The BDD, in other hand, helping me to execute the TDD in much more better, efficient way. So at the same time, the main two different over here, most of the time, the test-driven development, the developers are the main stakeholders there, and they are writing the test in their language or the programming language on their choice. But whereas the BDD is not only the developer, but also the other people. For example, product owner is involved in the conversation of defining the behavior. The developer who is developing the API is involved in the the case scenario conversation. Architects are part of it. Business development owners and stakeholders are part of it. So the previous case, most of the time, test cases are always responsibility of engineer or quality assurance person, etc. But now, the responsibility and accountabilities shift towards the group of people, which include the product owner, a quality assurance person, and then engineers who are taking part in that Scrum. So the important concept over here is we are making sure this is in a collaborative environment and everyone are discussing and making sure everyone are addressing the concerns or the design of that API. Now, for example, now today there is an API which is exposing, let's say, n number of metros in the Madrid area. Now API engineer who designing and developing everything, but tomorrow when the business owner and product owner come and say, hey, I expect the postal code or the zip code to be in a very specific manner. And if that test case is not really captured during this conversation, then it becomes a responsibility of all these 4 or 5 different people who are taking part in this BDD conversation. So that's the reason I'm very emphasizing towards it's so super important to define the roles in the BDD context. How we can make this roles definition well known within the organization? First of all, we have to educate our organization and the team and our stakeholders why we are doing this BDD-based development and what are the roles that they are going to play. Because we have to set the expectation for the product owners to give a clear acceptance criteria. At the same time, we have to make sure that our QA engineers or engineers to define and ask for the questions about the behavior of that API, how it's supposed to be. The main difference here is usually most of the people pretty aware about the BDD in the UI context. In your UI, you can easily define how this particular UI or button or drop-down work, and then you list it down. But in API context, it's going to be programmatical. So, but still, the product owner and the engineers can discuss in one place and come to a conclusion how this API is going to behave and how I am going to translate that into test cases. So I'm going to take a quick real-life case study that we did recently. So this is one of the test case management tool that we are using. So now, for example, API to get all the metro train station in Madrid. So that if I'm taking that as an example, now the product owner definitely write a epic and the user story for that. As part of the user story, we always practice 2 main concept of Scrum. One is a definition of done and definition of ready. How many of you use these 2 terms, definition of done and definition of ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah. So this is so super important because that is what makes people accountable and responsible. Definition of ready is nothing but making sure that user story or the epic is in a place so that we can pull out from the backlog and put it into a current sprint, or it is pretty much making that user story ready to develop. So as part of it, we mandate the product owner and the engineers to verify, is there any clear acceptance criteria? So once we have the clear acceptance criteria, the acceptance criteria will come into our part of the test cases. So it's one single line over there, let's say metros in Madrid. Then the specific of that implementation, we put that into a language called Grecin. So Grecin is a commonly available language. It's pretty much plain English with a little bit of grammar. For example, you don't need to write any if-else condition or anything, or you don't need to write any programming. It's pretty much you say, this is my scenario, and then for that scenario, what are the things that I expect, and what are the conditions that I would like to see. So over here, it's pretty much saying that payment summary API all field with default values in payment summary. And what I really want to see, when I pass the payload name and the all the fields, I want to see the other conditions and what are the returns and what are the outputs that I would like to see as an outcome. All right, beautiful. Now we do have easily defined the use case in the tool, and then we have defined the scenario in that tool. But if we do not automate all of this as part of our development process, it's going to be a nightmare for all of us. So what's happened here is like we come to this test management tool, and engineers, product owner, a business owner sit in one place and define these test cases in the management tool. That is translated into an implementation by the engineer. So now engineer can simply take that Gherkin language and use Cucumber type of programming tools to convert that as test cases. So in this case, if you really observe, the test case ownership is now with all these people, but engineer is just converting that into kind of a programmatical way. Now, after that, once the engineer implemented that test case using the Gherkin definition that they have put in the place, it'll simply get into the GitHub action or any Jenkins or any other CI/CD tool that you use to make sure that whenever there is a net new deployment happen in the your environment, whether it's a dev or it's a QA or it's SIT, UAT, production, doesn't matter. You make sure that whenever there is a deployment happen, you test against to the test cases that you define in the BDD. So that results will be published back into the automation with the APIs or the automation tool of the test case management tool. So what's happened right now is whenever there is a net new deployment and any new implementation happen, the results always going to get for all these three people, including me, manager, because I really want to see what is the quality of my API's implementation, what is the regressions, and what is the net new feature get into the picture, etc. So as part of it, I will start to see that green color buttons, for example, because whenever there is a new deployment happen, all of those tests will be ran as part of that test suite whenever there is a new deployment happen. And you can see there is another status code approved. So which means as part of the role definition, we have defined the only person who can approve this test case is a product owner, because he or she is the person who's going to define the acceptance criteria. So whenever they define, they make sure that that test case or the use case is approved. And as an engineer and engineering manager, as part of the CI/CD, we make sure that that feedback is coming back to the test case management tool. So now it's one single pane of glass. We can see everything in one place as an outcome. So that brings a very interesting part, because when we get into this point, the APIs are much more high quality, because everyone, whoever implementing this API is collaborating and discussing about their outcome of that API. And at the same time, it's also reducing or impacting the, what do you call, the error rate or regression rate by very low number. So how? On the day one, when everyone are collaborating and everyone are defining the API, the dashboard contain pretty much all the test cases. And as part of the test-driven development, we have to make sure that everything on the as a status is approved and all the outcome of that acceptance criteria is green. Now API is ready, deployed in the SIT UAT production, all good. Now tomorrow there is a another different product owner coming and saying, I want to add a new feature. So then adding a new feature is simple as like defining the epic user story, acceptance criteria, and once acceptance criteria is there, we will add the new line into the test management tool. And now, as part of the Scrum, we will start to develop these APIs. End of that API development, the API will get deployed into the UAT or production. And by that time, the whole suite will be ran against that deployment, so that we can make sure that the existing test cases are well ran, and we can make sure that the regression is already addressed, so we don't need to worry about the retesting everything manually again and again and again. So that means we are reducing the hours that we put into our regression test to become almost like near to 0, because the test cases are already available and test suite is there, CI/CD is there, and as part of the deployment, you get the results right away. Now, if because of some reason, if the test case, one of the test cases is failing, then the whole CI/CD should block the deployment of the SIT or UAT or the production based on the test results. So one of the things that we have done is we have defined a separate parameterized test cases so that we know which environment it getting deployed. At the same time, how so that we can measure where it's break. At the same time, who's responsible for that and who's accountable for that. Why we are doing that? By doing that, we can make sure that we can reduce the impact on the production or SIT or UAT, because we already know the regression test suite and then net new test cases for that particular feature. It also helps us to improve our engineering productivity, because whenever we say, okay, this work is done, the definition of done, usually people has to go and manually click and or define. But now as part of this reports and everything, we don't need to put any extra work or any extra time to do the same testings and same automations again and again. So that's another advantage. So with that context, I open up the floor for any other questions.